A former Brooklyn DA may soon be heading to court, but this time he won't be there doing the prosecuting. Charles Hines could be facing federal larceny charges. Authorities say he's accused of using money seized in drug deals to pay for his failed re-election campaign. The report says he bagged more than $1 million. And the Working Families Party throws its support behind Governor Andrew Cuomo after turning its back on a third-party candidate, Zephyr Teachout. Love the name. She says it's not over, though, and still ready to campaign against the governor tonight. She speaks out to RFL about the race and why she's not thrown in the towel. Plus, we will head overseas to eastern Ukraine, where violence between Ukrainian troops and pro-Russian insurgents continues today on the kickoff to his European tour. President Obama had another warning for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. As you can tell, more than a little bit here to do in the next 60 minutes, so let's get right to it. Former Brooklyn DA could be looking at real serious charges, felony larceny charges, in fact, because of a recent investigation. Charles Hines, an institution in Brooklyn, accused of stealing more than $1 million seized out of all things, drug deals. And where'd the money go? Allegedly to pay for a political PR campaign, allegedly paying more than $200 grand. The department investigations report obtained by the Times shows Hines may have violated a number of city charter rules in the process. The investigation also included the review of thousands of emails. Times went on to report here that Mr. Hines' emails, quote, paint a picture of a man who, after 24 years in office, used staff members, colleagues, and whatever resources he could tap to help shape what was an ultimately unsuccessful campaign against Kenneth P. Thompson. Now, State Supreme Court Justice Barry Kamens, who oversees New York City's criminal courts, he has been relieved of all administrative duties. Justice Kamens is accused of violating the Judicial Code of Ethics by advising Hines on his campaign and even offering legal advice. Well, tonight, our own Dominic, political journalist, he has been following the story, and he joins us now with more. Dom?
Well, Richard, tonight, Charles Hines, who has only been out of office as district attorney in Brooklyn for 6 months, finds himself in the hot seat. Within the hour, we spoke with Ozzy Pabera, a City Hall reporter for Capital New York. Ozzy, explosive allegation. Explain what is going on here.
So Charles Hines, the former Brooklyn district attorney, when he left office, the New York City Department of Investigation went through his official emails, and what they found, like you said, are explosive. Apparently, he was using money seized from criminals and possibly drug offenders, drug dealers, to pay for a political consultant to help him on his re-election campaign that he ended up losing. So you have money seized from the forfeiture fund going to a political consultant that was supposed to be doing work to help the office, and it actually was helping the sitting district attorney with his campaign. There are also allegations that a sitting judge was helping the Brooklyn district attorney and giving him political advice about how to campaign against Ken Thompson, the ultimate winner in that race.
Well, Ozzy, a sitting judge, as you just mentioned, that particular judge has been relieved of all administrative duties. This judge was apparently, as you just mentioned, advising Hines on his re-election bid. So are you telling us tonight, Ozzy, that the district attorney himself, even though he lost the election, could be looking at a criminal investigation?
Yes. The report from the New York City Department of Investigation was forwarded to state officials for further inquiry, and there could be criminal charges. Now, we've seen in New York, unfortunately, a number of times where people that make the law are accused of breaking the law. This is one of the rare times where one of the people who's accused of breaking the law is a person charged with enforcing the law. The district attorney knows better than anyone else what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. And what's sort of stunning is that a person in that position knows all of the investigative tools, knows exactly how the Department of Investigation and how the New York Police Department and how every other investigative entity, how they track official email, how they're able to seize this kind of information. And the fact that someone who had been there for so long and knew so much could be allegedly this careless in what they were doing is quite stunning.
Ozzy, money seized in drug raids. Let's talk about that for a second. Drug busts from drug dealers. Are district attorneys the only ones with discretion over such money?
It's a little bit unclear. The New York Police Department doesn't readily talk about this type of revenue stream, and city officials have not looked into the matter. There's been very little written about this. There was some press attention given to it on the national level, and one particular website, I believe it was Gothamist, who had followed up and written some local stories about it. But there really has not been any kind of inquiry or hearing or really complete accounting about what happens with this money. It's supposed to be used to fund law enforcement efforts. Basically, the idea is if your operation receives money or is able to stop a drug bust, they're then given that money to use to further enhance their ability to prevent other crimes. And it's a way for taxpayers not to bear the burden to fight a very costly and very long war, the war on drugs. But apparently, if these allegations against Joe Hines are true, it's being misused.
Mr. Hines was not just a regular DA. As you know, Ozzie, the special prosecutor in the Howard Beach case made international headlines at a time when the city was very polarized and many thought the city was about to explode. He got the convictions for the most part in that Howard Beach case, and as a result, a network movie was made about his life. Does this allegation change the legacy of Mr. Hines?
It gives him possibly a very sad and tragic bookend to what had been a laudable career. When he was campaigning, you saw a man who was very proud of what he was able to do. Brooklyn and the rest of New York City is just such a different place from when he first took over that it's almost hard to remember if you didn't grow up here, if you didn't see it firsthand like you and I did, the kind of tension that was palpable in the streets. And now, if you look at Brooklyn, you look at Howard Beach, these are places that are far better off than where they were about 20 years ago. So the fact that one of the people who was so instrumental in helping turn that city around has left office with this kind of cloud over his head and possibly heading to jail himself, it's stunning, and it's something that can never be erased from his legacy if the allegations are sustained.
Ozzie, I want to close where we started because it's mind-blowing when you think about this. A sitting district attorney, someone who has such a tremendous legacy, is accused of using funds seized from drug dealers to pay for his political consultant on his re-election campaign. Do I have it right? That's the allegation.
That's the allegation.
Wow. Thank you very much, Ozzie, for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So far, the former district attorney, Charles Hines, has not commented on this explosive allegation, Richard.
You know, you hit on it with Ozzie, Dom, but for me, you used to be able to know of the 5 boroughs, the DAs. Well, you used to be able to, Morgenthau was one, right? And then there was Hines. I mean, you can't exaggerate how influential. I mean, people forget the Bensonhursts and the Howard Beach is just how on edge some of these areas were. I mean, we were thinking this was a statewide guy for a while. He was a giant in New York prosecutorial circles.
He was a giant. No one believed that he would ever lose re-election. This upstart, Ken Thompson, came along. A number of African-American candidates had tried previously to Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson won the Democratic primary. Mr. Hines didn't give it up. He tried to run on the Republican line, but of course, a Democratic city, it wasn't good. But this is awful. I don't know how he gets around this.
And nobody, if they tell you they saw this coming, they're full of it. Nobody could have seen attached these kind of allegations, at least, to this guy. All right, let's bring in the rest of the panel. In addition to Dominic, we're joined by T.J. McCormick, Republican strategist, never dull, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. And Andrew, you know, listen, I don't want to lump it in with other people because there's some really serious charges, but you always see, it seems, when there is a longtime public servant who doesn't want to leave, and at the end, it's never pretty. Sometimes the endings, if there's an ugly final election or a campaign, there's a feeling almost, we've seen it in some races we've covered where they're like, timeout. I've given 20, 30, whatever the number of years is. I go out on my terms, but it doesn't work that way in politics. And it leads sometimes to some desperate actions, in this case, potentially criminal.
It's almost like the boxer who fights one fight too many. You know, you begin to wonder if maybe Hines should have seen the writing on the wall and just bowed out gracefully. My question when I was hearing the report and watching the interview is, had he ever done this before? Had Hines ever done this in a previous campaign, or was he just so scared of the challenge that he was facing in Thompson this go-round that he went to extraordinary lengths? The insider stuff, the stuff where he's getting advice from other members of the bar and perhaps illegally or in violation of the ethics rules. That, I guess, is I would suspect it's the kind of stuff that happens a lot, that you get sort of, under the table advice from people who shouldn't give it to you.
Why would the DA need political advice from a judge? I mean, I understand judges aren't just judges. They also play the game and stuff, but
well,
Hines needs political advice from this guy?
He hadn't faced a challenge like this before.
You know what's interesting about all this, and full disclosure, I've been friends with Mr. Hines for almost 30 years. So you become almost intertwined. The judges, frankly, the reporters, the district attorney, and you all become friends. And all of a sudden, you start asking each other. This is what happens in the real world. You start asking each other for advice. How should I handle this? But think about this. A prosecutor, the district attorney himself, asking a sitting judge, a chief judge, for political advice.
It just doesn't add up. You know what also is? We forget in the backdrop, there was headlines before even the election because a lot of cases that were made in his office. Already a couple, as I understand it, Dominic, have been kicked here because either you had a shady detective allegedly or some cases that there was either entrapment or, interrogations that weren't by the book, whatever the case was. But there's a whole bunch of open cases that are being reopened, I should say, right now.
Richard,
they got convictions
you hit it on the head. This is one big hot mess. You have a situation where now, unfortunately, the district attorney, not an ADA, the district attorney himself has no credibility. And a number of his convictions and murder convictions were already overturned because of the work of a corrupt cop. But now the credibility of the district attorney himself is on the line.
And again, when we're talking about the DA, when we're talking about the head of, in fact, the prosecutorial office of Kings County, huge, right? You can't claim ignorance. There's one job where you can't claim you don't know the law. Of course you do. Okay, TJ, keep it down, all right? Coming up next, everybody, we will head to the Ukraine, where fighting between Ukrainian troops and pro-Russian insurgents, it continues. And the president, our president, makes a push to get more U.S. troops on the ground in Europe. Is this the right move? Well, good friend to the program, Matthew Schmidt, a national security and political science professor, he joins our discussion right after the break.